kiddos, we're back for chapter 2, and remember that we are in the Lemonade War. Sorry, the dogs are being crazy, and they hit the table, and they're knocking things over, and there's some weird frog making a noise, so I hope that that's not too crazy. All right, so we are in chapter 2. Today, you are going to be you're going to be answering a question for me, and it says, how are Evan and Jesse's reactions the same, or how are they different when they're going to find out a really big piece of news, okay? And so Evan and Jesse, they don't see it the same way. Jesse feels one way about it, Evan feels another way about it. And so your question's going to be today to tell me maybe why do they not feel the same, okay? And you're going to have to find some text evidence. Remember, we're talking about word for word, right? Word for word evidence to back up why they don't feel the same way about it. So we're on chapter 2 today. The chapter is called Breakup. Okay, I'm on page 11. Remember, we always have a definition of our chapter. It says breakup, noun. Dissolution of a unit, an organization, or a group of organizations. The Justice Department sometimes forces the breakup of large corporations into several smaller companies. So what this is basically saying is you have a large unit, and when we think about it like a fraction, right? I have a whole pizza, and when I break it up, I'm gonna have lots of different pieces of pizza. Same thing with like a big business, okay? So let's think about Walmart. Walmart sells everything: tires, food, clothes, cleaning supplies. What if we broke those up and there was lots of different departments? So you had to go to one store to work for your car. You had to go to another store to get your food. You had to go to another store to get your clothing, and they weren't all in one store together. So that's what it means when it says breakup, okay? All right, page 11, chapter 2. Jessie didn't get it. She just didn't get it. What was Evan's problem? He'd been acting like a weirdo for 2 days now. And it was 2 days ago that the letter had arrived. Now, we don't know what this letter is yet, right? We heard her reference it in the first one. She was asking him, are you mad because of the letter, right? But we don't know what this letter is yet. But why would he be so upset about that letter? This is a puzzle, Jessie told herself, and I'm good at puzzles. But it was a puzzle about feelings. And Jessie knew that feelings were her weakest subject. That means Jessie has a hard time understanding other people's feelings, right? She has a hard time with feelings. Jessie sat in the cool darkness of the basement and thought back to Monday, the day the letter had come. Everything had been normal. She and Evan were putting together a lemonade stand in the driveway when the mailman walked up and handed Jessie a bundle of letters. Evan never bothered to look at the mail, but Jessie was always entering contests and expecting to win, so she flipped through the letters right away. Boring, 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 said Jessie as each letter flashed by. Hey, something from school, addressed to Mom. She held up a plain white envelope. What do you think it is? Don't know, said Evan. He was in the garage uncovering the small wooden table they usually used for a stand. It was buried under 2 snow tubes, 2 boogie boards, and the garden hose. Jessie watched while Evan gave a mighty pull and lifted the table up over his head. Wow, he's gotten so big, thought Jessie, remembering what Mom had said about Evan's growth spurt. Sometimes Jessie felt like Evan was growing twice as fast as she was. Growing up, growing away. Who else? Some of you guys out there, you have cousins or you have siblings that you spend a lot of time with. If any of you guys have older siblings, then you kind of know what Jessie's feeling, right? Like, he's just growing up and he's not wanting to hang out with her as much. It looks important, said Jessie. It looks like bad news, is what she thought in her head. See the difference in what she's saying and what she's speaking? I know this is a little bit backwards, but right here, it's in those quotation marks. That means that's what she said. And right here, when it's slanted like that, that's what's going on in her head. Those are her thoughts. Was there a problem? A complaint? A mix-up? All the nervousness she'd been feeling about skipping to 4th grade suddenly burbled up inside her. Oh, okay. Jessie is skipping a grade. That's big news, right? Jessie's going to skip 3rd grade and go to 4th grade. This table's really dirty, said Evan. Do you think we can just cover it with lots of cups and the pitcher and no one will notice? Jessie looked. The table was streaked with black. No, Evan groaned. I'll clean it, said Jessie. Evan had only agreed to have a lemonade stand because it was one of her favorite things to do. The least she could do for him was clean the gunk off the table. Maybe, she said, holding up the envelope again, they're postponing school. Maybe the first day isn't going to be until next Tuesday. You think? That got Evan's attention. Let's ask Mom to open it, he said. See, Evan doesn't want school to start, right? He's like, yeah, postpone school. Up in the humming cool of her office, Mrs. Tresky read the letter through once. Well, she said, this is a curveball. She looked right at Evan. Jessie thought her face looked worried. Evan, you and Jessie are going to be in the same class this year. You'll both have Mrs. Overton. Jessie felt relief flood her entire body. The same class? If she could have wished for one thing in the whole world, this is what she would have wished for. She would be with Evan, and Evan would make everything easier. He would introduce her to all those fourth graders. He would show them all she was okay. Not some puny second grader who didn't really belong. Can you imagine this, kiddos? Can you imagine skipping third grade? Okay, so skipping Miss Misty or Miss Catherine all together and coming straight to me. Going from second grade straight to me. Wouldn't that have been crazy? And so now Evan is going to have his little sister in class with him. Same teacher, okay? Is that maybe why Evan was, trying to avoid her in the basement and maybe not wanting to talk to her and getting mad? I don't know. We'll find out. But Evan didn't look happy. He looked angry. Why? He asked in almost a shouting voice. Mrs. Tresky scanned the letter. Well, the classes were small to start with. And now some of the fourth graders they thought would be attending aren't because they're moving or switching to private schools. So they need to combine the two small classes into one big class. That is so unfair, said Evan. I wanted Mrs. Scobie, and I don't want... He looked at Jessie. This is so unfair. Jessie was surprised. This was great news. Why didn't Evan see that? They always had fun together at home. Now they could have fun together in school, too. It'll be fun, she said to Evan. It will not be fun, said Evan. School isn't fun. And then he stomped downstairs and locked himself in the room for the rest of the afternoon. They never finished their lemonade stand. And here it was 2 days later, and Evan was still all locked up, even though he wasn't in his room. He wouldn't talk to her, and he wouldn't play with her. So Jessie went up to her room and did what she always did when she was upset or angry or sad or confused. She started reading Charlotte's Web. She had read the book about 100 times. She was at the good part, the happy part. Wilbur had just been named some pig, and he was getting all kinds of attention from the Zuckermans and the whole town. Y'all have read Charlotte's Web, right? That is a really good part. But Jessie couldn't settle into the happy feeling, the one that usually came when Charlotte said, I dare say my trick will work and Wilbur's life can be saved. Instead, she kept noticing an unhappy feeling, tap, tap, tapping on her shoulder. And it wasn't the unhappy feeling that came from knowing that Charlotte was going to die on page 171. It was Evan. She couldn't stop thinking what he had said. Jessie could only remember one other time that Evan had said, I hate you, to her. Remember in chapter 1, that's how he ends it. He yells at her, I hate you. Grandma had been over and Evan needed help with his math homework. He had that frustrated, screwed up mouth look that he sometimes got with math or spelling or writing reports. Mom called it his he's gonna blow look. But Grandma couldn't help him because it was all Greek to her. Ever heard an adult say that? That's all Greek to me, right? We've done Greek mythology. We know we can't read Greek. We can't say Greek. And so when something's all Greek to you, that means none of it makes sense. So Grandma didn't understand the math. So Jessie had shown him how to do each problem. Well, she just kind of sort of jumped in and done the problems for him. That was helping, wasn't it? Grandma had called her a girl genius. But Evan had ripped his paper in half and run upstairs shouting, I hate you, just before slamming the door. That was last year. So what are we already starting to learn from Jessie and Evan? We're learning that Jessie's really smart. We know she's getting to skip a grade. You can't skip a grade unless you're crazy smart, right? And we're learning that Evan kind of struggles in school. It says that he struggled with math or spelling or a writing prompt, okay? And so how do you feel when your brother or sister, or those kiddos who don't have brothers and sisters, if you have cousins or somebody, how do you feel when they're better at you than something, better than you at something, right? Evan maybe is feeling embarrassed. Evan's maybe feeling like upset with himself because he's not as good as his little sister. Okay, so that may be kind of why Evan's feeling that way. Jessie rested the book on her stomach and stared at the ceiling. People were confusing. She'd rather do 100 math problems than try to figure out someone else's mixed up feelings any day of the week. That's why she and Evan got along so well. He'd just tell her straight out, I'm mad at you because you ate the last Rice Krispie treat. And then she could say, sorry, hey, I got some Starbursts in my room. You want them? And that would be that. Evan was a straight shooter. What it means to be a straight shooter is you tell it straight, right? You don't sugarcoat anything. You're upset, I'm going to say I'm upset. Okay, you're sad, I'm going to say I'm sad. Not like the girls at school. The ones who had started that club. She rolled over onto her side to get away from those thoughts. Across the room, against the opposite wall, she noticed the 3 pieces of foam core her mom had bought for Jessie's Labor Day project. Every year, the Rotary Club sponsored a competition for kids to see who could come up with the best display related to the holiday. This was the first year Jessie was old enough to participate, and she had begged her mom to buy foam core and gel pens and fluorescent paper and special stickers for her display. She was determined to win the prize money, $100. But she hadn't been able to come up with a single idea that seemed good enough. So here it was, just 5 days before the competition, and the foam core was still completely blank. Jessie reached for her book. She didn't want to think about the girls at school. She didn't want to think about the competition. She started reading again. Wilbur and Charlotte were at the fair, and Charlotte was beginning to show her age. Jessie read the words that Wilbur said to his best friend. I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better. Well, the second part didn't apply at all, but Jessie imagined herself saying the first line. I'm awful sorry to hear you're feeling poorly, Evan. It sounded about right. At least it would show him that she cared, and Jessie knew that was important when someone was feeling upset. She decided to go downstairs and give it a try. She would do just about anything to get Evan back to the way he was before the letter. Jessie looked in the kitchen and the backyard. No Evan. She was halfway down the steps to the basement when she heard a noise coming from the garage. She opened the door and felt the full heat of the day on her skin. It was like some giant had blown his hot, stinky breath on her. In the garage, she found Evan and Scott Spencer. Weird, she thought. Evan doesn't even like Scott Spencer. They'd been on-again, off-again friends from kindergarten. You guys have friends like that, you know? Sometimes you're friends, sometimes you're fighting. Just, you know, those people that you just have a hard time getting related to sometimes. But ever since Scott had purposely put Evan's bike helmet under the wheel of the Treskys minivan so that Mrs. Tresky ran over it when she backed out, their friendship had definitely been off. Jessie looked from Evan to Scott and back again. Now she had no idea what to say. I'm awfully sorry to hear you're feeling poorly, Evan. Didn't seem to make much sense when Evan was obviously having fun with his friend. She tried to think of something else to say. All she could come up with is, what are you doing? Got a loud bird back there, kiddos. The boys were bent over a piece of cardboard. Evan was writing letters with a skinny red felt-tipped pen. The purple color was in the middle of the garage. The purple cooler was in the middle of the garage, and 2 plastic chairs were stacked on top of it. On the top chair was a brown paper bag. Nothing, said Evan, not looking up. Jessie walked over to the boys and peered over Evan's shoulder. Lemonade, 50 cents. She said, "You spelled lemonade wrong. It's an O, not an I." But she thought, "Oh, good, a lemonade stand, my favorite thing to do." The boys didn't see anything. Jessie saw Evan's mouth tighten. So how do you think that made Evan feel when she corrected him, especially when she corrected him in front of his friend? His mouth tightens. What do we know about people who tighten their mouth like that? "You want me to make the lemonade?" she asked. "Already made," said Evan. "I could decorate the sign," she said. "I'm good at drawing butterflies and flowers and things." Scott snorted. "Huh? We don't want girl stuff like that on our sign." "Do you want to use my lockbox to keep the money in? I got a tray with separate compartments for all the different coins." "Nope," said Evan, still working on the sign. "Well," she said, looking around, "I can clean the table for you." The small wooden table, still covered in black streaks, was pushed up against the bikes. "We're not using it," said Evan. "But we always use the table for a stand," said Jessie. Evan pushed his face in her direction. "We don't want it." Jessie took a couple of steps back. Her insides felt runny, like a fried egg that hadn't cooked enough. She knew she should just go back in the house, but for some reason her legs wouldn't move. She stood there, her bare feet rooted to the cool cement. Scott whispered something to Evan, and the two boys laughed, low and mean. We've all been there, right? We've had a friend or somebody we don't really like whisper next to us, look at us, and laugh, right? We know how that makes us feel. How do you think Jessie's feeling right now? Jessie swayed toward the door, but her feet stayed planted. She couldn't stand it that Evan wanted to be with Scott, who was a real jerk, more than her. "Hey," she said, "I bet you need change. I've got a ton. You could have all my change, as long as you pay it back at the end of the day." "Don't need it," said Evan. "Yeah, you do," insisted Jessie. "You always need change, especially in the beginning. You'll lose sales if you can't make change." Evan capped the pen with a loud snap and stuck it in his pocket. "Scott's bankrolling us," he said. "His mom keeps a change jar, so we've got plenty." The boys stood up. Evan held the sign for Scott to read, turning his back to Jessie. "Awesome," said Scott. Jessie knew that the sign was not awesome. The letters were too small and thin to read from a distance. Evan should have used a fat marker instead of a skinny felt-tip pen. Everybody knew that. There weren't any pretty decorations to attract customers, and the word lemonade was spelled wrong. Why wouldn't Evan take a little help from her? She just wanted to help. Scott turned to her and said, "Are you really going to be in 4th grade this year?" Jessie's back stiffened. "Yep," she said. "Wow, that is so freaky." "It's not," she said, sticking her chin out. "Is too," said Scott. "I mean, you're a 2nd grader and now you're going to be a 4th grader? That's just messed up." Jessie looked at Evan, but he was busy taping the sign to the cooler. "Lots of people skip grades," said Jessie. "It's not a big deal." "It's completely weird," said Scott. "I mean, you miss everything from a whole year. You missed the whole unit on Antarctica, and that was the best. And the field trip to the aquarium, and the thing where you send letters all over the country. Remember that, Evan? You got that letter from Alaska. That was so cool." Evan nodded, but he didn't look up. "It's not that big a deal," said Jessie again. Her voice stretched tight like a rubber band. "It's like you miss a year of your life," Scott said. "It's like you're gonna die a whole year earlier than the rest of us because you never had 3rd grade. Jessie felt cold and hot at the same time. Part of her wanted to yell, "That doesn't make any sense." But the other part of her felt so freakish, like Scott had just noticed that she had 3 legs. Evan stood up and tossed the paper bag to Scott. Then he grabbed the plastic chairs with one hand. "Come on, let's go." He reached down to grab one handle of the cooler. Scott grabbed the other, and together they lifted it and began to walk out of the garage. "Hey, Evan," said Jessie, calling to their backs. Can I come too?" "No," he said, without turning around. "Come on, please. I'll be a big help. I can do lots of things." "You're too young," he said sharply. "You're just a baby." The boys walked out. You're just a baby. Jessie couldn't believe that Evan had said that. After all the stuff they'd done together, and he was only 14 months older than she was, hardly even a full year. She was about to yell back something really harsh, something stinging and full of bite like, "Oh yeah?" when she heard Scott say to Evan, "Man, I can't believe you have to be in the same class as your little sister. If that happened to me, I'd move to South America." "Yeah, tell me about it," replied Evan, crossing the street. The words died on Jessie's lips. She watched Evan walk away, getting smaller and smaller. He was deserting her. He wasn't going to stand by her at school. He wasn't going to smooth the way for her. He was going to be on the other side with all of them, looking down on her, telling everyone that she was too young to be part of the crowd, telling everyone that she didn't belong. "Fine for you, Evan Tresky," she said as she marched into the house, her fists balled up at her sides. "I don't need you. I don't need you to have fun. I don't need you to run a lemonade stand. And I don't need you to make friends in the 4th grade." Halfway up the stairs, she stopped and shouted, "And I am not a baby." So, think back to when we first find out about the letter, right? Right here in the beginning of our chapter. And it says that why are their reactions to finding out that they're in the same class different? Okay, so why is Jessie's reaction of being happy and Evan's reaction of not being happy and being mad at her, why are they different? Why do they have different feelings about it? Okay, I'm asking you to use race. Okay, so remember, you'll restate, you're going to answer the question, and then I want you to go find me some word-for-word evidence in here to back up why they don't feel the same. Just to prove Jessie feels this way, Evan feels this way, okay? If you need any help, let me know. I love you guys. I miss you guys. I hope you're liking the book, and if you need anything, shoot me a message, and I can work with you, okay? Bye, kiddos.